can't see the output.
Yeah, here we go. We're live. See, isn't it amazing? That's the second guest that's beaten me to it. Welcome to my show, Damien Lovegrove. Welcome, Damien.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, it's great to be here.
Lovely. It's always the difficult time as we're just about to I'm just about to say we're going to go live, and there's something you just want to check before we go live. But don't worry about it. That's what it's all about. It's live and uncut. My name's Paul Griffiths. My guest is Damien Lovegrove. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a real great pleasure. So much to talk about because you've got such a long career in not only photography but everything else. Let's start off right. The word which I really like to start off with, Damien, is what was the first camera that you can recollect in your household?
Well, my father used to have folding cameras, 35mm, little Zeiss Iconters, I think they were. I say he had several because they never seemed to work properly. Some of the flaps came out sideways, but the lens was never parallel to the film, and so there was always soggy on the left or soggy on the right. He used to shoot lots of slides, and we'd be, we'd have to sit at home and watch the slides projected on the wall, all that sort of things, family pictures. But my first camera I had was a Rolly 35 with a little pull-out lens, a very small camera, wonderful little camera. And that's what I shot my first sort of proper photography on. And then I joined the BBC as a cameraman. That little Rolly, I shot my portfolio on that got me a cameraman's job at the BBC. So it's a great little camera. And then I bought a Pentax Spotmatic, and I had Pentaxes then for many years, and then Nikons, and went through medium format and all sorts. I probably had 50 cameras.
Pentax cameras around about that time were pretty popular. Were they the ones that used the 43? Was it 43mm thread or something?
It's the M42, I think it is. And you just screw on lenses, Takamars, super Takamars. If you were luxury, if you had a bit of money to spend, you could buy a super multi-coated Takamar. But I just had about three lenses for that camera, and that was perfect. That's all I needed. Just worked in manual mode, had a Western Master 5mm, and away I went.
Previous guest, Phil Silverman, had his father's Western. He was showing me, and he said it still worked, and he still used it from time to time. So I've never used a light meter, so fantastic to hear that name mentioned again. So let's really go straight through the forget the schooling period and everything else. Obviously, photography is quite an interesting part of your life at that time, but you started working for the BBC. Tell us a little bit about your BBC life and what you got involved with there, please, Damien.
Yeah, I mean, 1984, so it's going way back into the last century. I joined the BBC as a cameraman, and I was 19, a bit naive, as it is. And I was one of a couple of thousand people interviewed for the job, and I managed to black my way through and got the job, so I was very lucky. But from there on, I had 3 years of training to be from assistant cameraman to become a cameraman, and then another qualifying course. I mean, the training, you do sort of 6 months residential training, and then you do 3 years, and then you do another 3 months training, and then you're qualified. So you do your A course and then your Q course, and then you do another 3 years or so as a cameraman to get to the point where you can become a senior cameraman or a lighting cameraman, etc. So in those 3 years, I started lighting, and I used to go out and shoot with 2 or 3 lights at the time. And then I went and did my lighting director's training. So again, that was another residential course. And I learned with, I can't remember the name of the guy now, but he must have been 65 or so, a sort of retired lighting director, made his name in the black and white movies from Elstree and Boreham Wood back in the sort of between the wars and things. And his skill and knowledge was, I didn't really appreciate it at the time. I learned a lot from him, but I was thinking I wanted to be with Top of the Pops and doing all this moving lights and much more sort of funky modern stuff, because I was, young and impressionable. But actually looking back at it now, what I learned from him is invaluable.
Yeah, and isn't that true of even photography today, how much you can learn from the old masters, as I call them, from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really it comes down to the everything was shot in camera. You know, when I've spent more of my life shooting on film than I have digital, and I moved to digital in 2001. So what quite an early pioneer, I suppose, in the professional sense of the word. You know, so but on film, I used to shoot transparency for photo libraries in London, medium format. I used to shoot all my professional work, weddings, portraits and things on film, and you have to get it right in camera. The lighting has to be spot on. You can't be faffing around and in post-production, you know, you can, okay, there's only a certain amount you can do with your print, you know, with dodging and burning, etc. But every print has to be handmade, and it's one of those things. And so those skills have come forward through my digital career and have put me in good stead and given me the position I'm in now.
Yeah, exactly. So you left BBC, and what did you move straight into wedding photography at that stage, or was there something in between which led you to wedding photography?
When I left the BBC, I became a commercial photographer. So I was working for advertising agencies.
Okay.
I was working for companies like Parker Pens. I photographed Adidas training shoes, Slazenger tennis rackets, etc. You know, it's a whole raft of products. Cigarette dispensing machines for BAT and Martell brandy, all sorts of things. And to be quite honest, it was great, except the fact that you had to chase money all the time. You're on the phone. You know, 3 months after you'd done a job for maybe Motorola or something, you'd be chasing money for a product that's probably out of date, you know. So anyway, I didn't really like that. I decided to make a change in my life because I've always wanted to build a business around my personal life, you know, what I want to do in life, and then let the business facilitate that. So that's the process I've always had. And so I realized that I could do something good in wedding photography, because at the time, the wedding photography that I'd looked at wedding shows and things was pretty average. I mean, technically amazing, you know, knock spots of what's produced at the moment. Nearly everybody was using a tripod. They were using medium format. They were metering it. They were using prime lenses. You know, we are talking about the days where the quality, these pictures could go billboard size easily. It's not none of this sort of run around, get a shot here, shot there, handhelds everywhere. But it was very staid. There was no life, no soul, no energy, no love, no passion. And I thought, this is what it needs. Let's put an injection of that into photography. I didn't want to stand back and watch and observe and be a fly on the wall, because that's not really what I'm about. As a person, I want to inject some energy into a scene and bring people together, get them laughing, see their real characters, and bring them out onto my lens, through my lens, onto the digital camera. So that's what I did. I'm very much a case of, you know, I'm a people's person, and when I'm shooting a wedding, I'm on stage. And so there we are.
Yeah. But interesting enough, you just mentioned to me before we started the show that you wrote a book on wedding photography, which unfortunately you haven't got to show us, which is still available on Amazon. Although you did very politely mention that it's probably a little bit out of date. But,
you see, the thing is that a lot of what I write, I mean, in terms of the business aspects of the book, it's always going to be relevant. You know, marketing and the strategies are always relevant. They've been relevant ever since Babylonian days. You know, but at the same time, the some of the fine detail about advertising in magazines, etc., is less relevant, of course, because when I wrote the book, Facebook didn't exist. It wasn't where it is now. And things have changed, you know, the way people buy their images, the way they archive images, the way you sell work has changed. And of course, things change with it. But the real core thrust of the book about actually creating a business, how to market yourself, how to develop a product line, how to establish what your production capability is, like how many weddings can you shoot a year, how many albums can you produce, and how much money to earn from each wedding in terms of the profitability, in order to give yourself the lifestyle that you want, not just now, but when you retire. There's no point starting a business and then finding that you get to 60, 65 and you're thinking, oh my God, if I stop shooting, where's my money going to come from?
Yeah, exactly.
You by that point in life, you needed to have sorted all that. So the book is very relevant.
That's good. So that's in actual fact a very good segue, because we're now moving into a period where 2001, you started your digital work. But you started to blog, you said to me before, around about 2008.
Yeah, I was in Singapore, and we had a little flight delay, I think, and I was into a bookshop in Singapore. And in front of me, I wanted to suss out what all this blogging was. I didn't even know what blog meant. I mean, I didn't know whether it was short for Babylonian, whatever. I had no idea. So I thought, I went into a bookshop, Waterstones or the equivalent in Singapore, and there was this book, and it said, "Blog your way to a six-figure income." And I thought, wow,
I love that. Yeah.
So I bought that and I read it on the plane. And when I got back, I said to a friend of mine, Martin Plant, I said, "Martin, can we put a blog together? I've been reading about it and this is what we want to do." And we started Pro Photo Nut, and he got it all up and running for me because I didn't know about coding and stuff. And WordPress at that stage was quite new, it wasn't quite as easy to use as it is now. And Pro Photo Nut was born, and I've just been writing ever since. And I've written 500 articles on there, and a lot of them are 3,000 or 4,000 words. There must be 50 times that pictures, and we've had perhaps 7 million views since that time.
So this is interesting, actually, because I haven't really been able to touch on this part of subject matter, which I think is so important for a would-be professional photographer, or even a, dare I use the term, hardcore hobbyist photographer, where they really want to advertise their work. So if we can, I'd like to sort of spread a little bit more knowledge as regards to the social networking activities that you got involved in it. So the blog started it off, photonut.com.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you've got to understand that I went from a period at that time when I had a business consultant, and he said, well, I said to him, my daughter's going to be going to secondary school in a couple of years' time, and I need to go from, I don't want to be shooting weddings at that point. I want to be at home at weekends, and I want to have a family time. I want to see what boyfriend she's bringing back, etc. So I said to him, I want to go from 100% income from weddings, which is where we were, to 0 from weddings and 100% from something else. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And he said, no problem. He said, write a book. That's the first thing. So that was the wedding book. I wrote the wedding book. Yeah. And he said, your business now is to transfer knowledge, enthusiasm, and education and experience and wisdom to the next generation of photographers. And that's going to be the core of your business. So I started running workshops and things. And I thought the blog was a good way of connecting with other photographers. And, it's perhaps less effective for perhaps portrait photographers to connect with potential clients, but it's also useful for wedding photographers. If you're a wedding photographer and you blog your weddings at Claridge's Hotel, the Dorchester, the Ritz, or wherever you happen to be shooting, Backwell WI Hall, it doesn't matter. The point is, if you blog your pictures, you can SEO those blog posts and you can start to get organic leads. It becomes a marketing tool. But for me, I was connecting with other photographers, and they were my customers, shall we say. So I've going from photographing portraits and weddings to moving through to actually taking pictures and educating other photographers. That was my career path, and the blog was a really good tool for that.
And so basically then, of course, we now move very neatly. This is going really well. Because we now move very neatly into your next part of your career, which you mentioned to me again before the show, about teaching. This is obviously, and that part of it, your workshops, has obviously continued on. I get the impression from the way we were talking about, I get the impression that teaching is a very important part of your life now. I know you do still carry on with your photography. Would I be right in assuming that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think there's something very special about teaching. There's something very special about sharing knowledge, ideas, experiences. And sharing experiences are in a way is a wonderful thing to do. And so when I do workshops in Spain or Italy or America or things like that, I've got people on there and they just love it and they soak it up. It's a very wonderful experience, as well as passing on knowledge and techniques and information. People are gaining from the enthusiasm, they're gaining from their a renewed enlightenment, not enlightenment so much, but a vigor for taking pictures. What's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean. Just being able to have just that bit more passion from within, rather than sometimes people come on a workshop and they start the day and they might be, oh, it's raining today, I'm not really, you know. But within 20 minutes, they're just like, wow, and they've got their camera in their hand, shooting. Because I don't mind what the weather is. You know, when you've shot 400 weddings in the UK, it doesn't matter what it is.
It doesn't. You know, anything could be thrown at you. It doesn't
sunshine, wherever.
Yeah. Would you say that your workshops, you're the type of teacher that likes to take your I'm going to use the term pupil or your workshop member, the type to take them out of their comfort zone? Are you looking to basically move them into another area of photography, which maybe the everyday photographer hobbyist wouldn't dream of going into?
Not necessarily. I think, you see, it's not like learning to ski or something like that. It's more like it's a process where what I'm doing is, when I started the teaching, by the way, I was taught how to teach at the BBC. I did 6 months at Evesham, their training department, as a trainer process to teach lighting. And before I got made redundant, that's another thing. They closed the studio and stuff. But the thing is, I was then taught some very fundamentals which stuck with me. And one of those was, of course, to explain to someone what you're going to teach them it, and then explain what they've just learned. And so they get this sort of feedback loop. Now, I applied that initially to other would-be professional photographers or professional photographers who wanted a slice of the cake, shall we say, that Julie and I had set up. You know, we were shooting weddings day in, day out at £5,000 plus a wedding. And I was teaching people how to do that, what they needed to do. And it's not that challenging. You've just got to put everything in place in the right order. And you're only as strong as your sort of weakest link. So, you know, I was explaining the whole process. And as throughout 2007, 2008, we started to hit this sort of financial crisis in 2008. And what happened was I had a surge of people wanting to become photographers because they had some redundancy money. They were leaving a career maybe in banking or teaching or as estate agents or what have you. And they were moving into photography. And photography became sort of swamped. It had a little bit of perhaps there were more photographers in the professional market between 2008 and 2011 and maybe 2012 than there were jobs for them. So it was a bit of a challenge, and that's when I decided to move over to teaching people that are passionate about photography, not necessarily people that want to earn money from photography. And that's when my life changed too, because now I don't have to traipse around the streets of Bristol or Manchester or Dublin or what have you. I can, in the rain, I can go to Spain or America or Australia or somewhere, because what I'm doing is I'm doing aspirational work. You know, I'm taking pictures with people, in a way, beautiful people in beautiful places, but I'm working with people in a sort of a 24-hour environment. You know, we eat together in the evening. It's a whole experience, and that experience fuels my passion for photography.
Yeah, that's very nice to hear that, actually. With regards to your commercial work, though, is that is still continuing through? You're still fashion photographer, lifestyle photographer?
Yes, a bit. I mean, it's difficult. I've got so many, you see, I think I've diversified. You know, sometimes it's hard to know what I do, because this month I've got 3 magazine articles out in the press. And each one of those is 2,500 to 3,000 words. And so they take a bit of time to write. I've been doing some work for Fujifilm. I'm working for for Wilkinson's cameras. I'm doing their digital splash event, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm in Exeter on Tuesday, or is it Wednesday, doing the Society's Roadshow. So there's a lot of activities that I'm in this. I'm teaching, lecturing. I've got a few portrait clients, and I fit those in between my journeys and my travels. So probably about once a fortnight, I've got what I call a paid for booked private client shoot. And then I've got some corporate work as well. So that tends to be maybe a dress collection, or a recent shoot I did was for the museum in Bristol. They wanted to make the Bristol Museum a venue for wedding receptions and parties and events. And so they needed someone to come and light the museum, and it's a big place, you know. So
yeah. And this is important what you're saying here, actually, because with returns, people say photographer, they immediately think, what do you photograph? But then to have other strings to your bow, workshops, teaching, as I say, and then some other work, writing as well. There are so many strings to your bow, which will keep.
I'm still
you
on
busy.
tomorrow. I'm shooting for the Photo Library in London. So tomorrow I'll be working with Gareth Ronson, who's a GP friend of mine, and we're photographing statins for the Science Photo Library. So we've already photographed statins a few years ago. So what we're doing is we are bringing our library of pictures that we've got there up to date. You know, so it's an ongoing process, and I think people have said, you know, stock is dead. It's far from dead. You know, it's we get really, really good income from stock, and it's something. If you've got the camera, you know, I'm going to be shooting on this, the Fuji X-T1. I've got the lenses, I've got the camera, I've got the space, I've got the lights. There's nothing stopping me, you know. So if you haven't got a job one day and you're trying to earn some money from your photography, shoot stock. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. Some of the best-selling shots we've done are things like photographing babies having MMR jabs, or all the things that no one else wants to photograph. There's a big market for it.
Yeah, Phil Silverman, who's my guest a couple of weeks ago, we talked a lot about stock photography, and he's been able to basically create a form of income for that. He said it's not a pastime that's going to make him rich anytime quick, but it's certainly a way of him bringing some money in. David Duchemin last week as well. He's very fortunate, obviously, with his name and obviously his market out in America. He's doing stock photography, and as you say, another string to your bow. You know, if you're not doing anything.
Absolutely. I mean, I started with the Science Photo Library in 1986, and we're still selling pictures from 1989 era. Amazing. So those from that era, and they're still selling. My daughter's now 19, and I've got pictures of her having injections and things like that. I mean, you know, we don't really inject the baby because we cut the needle off and put a little bit of araldite on the end of the needle, and so you know, it dents the skin, but of course and all these sorts of things. And there's always tricks, of course, with light it beautifully, so it looks fantastic.
And this is what we've
but those pictures, they go on and sell and sell and sell.
Yeah, I just sorry to interrupt you there, but I was going to say this is the main aspect of what you're talking about. Is lighting is really what you learnt with the BBC, and there's obviously what has helped you through with your career, with your portrait photography, and obviously some of your stock photography as well. Yeah,
I mean, for me, lighting is everything. You know, I mean, if you switch the lights off in your room and I switch the lights off here, there'd be nothing. Okay, exactly. And to be quite honest, you know, you're looking at me from this tiny little lens. You know, it's minuscule. It's smaller than the nail on my little finger, and yet, you know, it's a perfectly acceptable picture, and it's acceptable and it looks good because of the light.
Yeah,
ultimately,
that's what
matters. So, you know, and as photographers, we're the worst, you know, sometimes, because we've got all this kit. Yeah, and I've seen wedding photographers out there, and they photograph their albums, and I'm thinking, really, you know, is that the best picture of the album that you could take? And sometimes we're lazy, you know, we don't get all the lights out and everything's set up. You know, really, I think the important thing to do is when you're creating an image, well, even whether it's a Google Hangout or whatever, is just to put 100% in. Put your brand into that image, irrespective of how it's shot, whether you're shooting it on an iPhone or a Fuji X-T1 or what have you. It doesn't matter what kit you use. When you get the lighting right, it will look amazing. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Let's talk about the gear. I know we again had a little chat before. Gear's not everything, and it's not the be-all and end-all. It's basically a tool at the end of the day. Pentax Spotomatic you started off with, if my memory serves me correct. That's right.
What did you move on through? What did you move on through from there?
Well, I mean, I've probably had 100 cameras in my life. I've had more cameras than I've had cars. I've changed my car every 3 years. So, and it's just as you go. I mean, the thing is, all the cameras I've ever had and owned have been paid for with photography. So my Pentax Spotmatic, I went off to Egypt. We went going through the Western Desert in Egypt and came across this caravanserai. We were in a coach and we just stopped and we got out and there was camels and things, and there was this brilliant mirage, absolutely fantastic. So there I had with my Kodachrome 64 shooting this mirage, and with a Tachyna 300mm lens and a 2x converter. The whole thing was sort of hanging off the front, but it didn't matter with a mirage, nothing sharp anyway. But
Yeah.
In that mirage went on to sell thousands and thousands of pounds. You know, that shot it was in every Dorling Kindersley book of physics. It was everywhere. So anyway, the money from that then allowed me to move up to Nikon, you know, and I had myself some nice Nikon gear. And then I started shooting weddings and I bought Hasselblad. I had Mamiya twin lens reflexes before that for medium format work. And the Hasselblad, then I used that for my science photo library work. And Fuji Velvia came in just at the right time for me because that all came together. And then I went through that, and then I went on to Rolleiflex 6008s, Integral, is it, or I don't know, whatever. But they were, I remember £13,000 or something back in 2000 or something on these wonderful Schneider lenses, and there's a few Zeiss lenses, of course, and the Distagons and the Rolleiflex. And I had a 6001 or something, or 2 as a backup, you know, 6 or something. And then a year after I bought all this kit, and I was shooting weddings with this medium format, winding it all on 220, you know, the sort of thing, 24 frames on a roll. Year after that, I was out in Fuerteventura, and I was on a Gordon McGowan course. So this is PTO, photo training overseas, and I was there, and Gordon was doing some training, I was doing some training, and I went on his lecture there, and he was using this Fujifilm S1 camera. And it had a little screen on the back. It was tiny, but you could see the picture. Whoa. And for me, that was ideal. Because obviously, the first of all, what made it great was the fact that you had instant feedback. So rather than having to rely on metering or experience, you could now shoot dangerously and know whether you've cocked up or not. Yeah. So rather than have to shoot a whole roll of film and cross-process it, and maybe you might get something, now you can actually mess around with stuff. So we started shooting into the light a lot more. We started to take the exposure up by +2 stops, +3 stops, really making very high key imagery. I was starting to work into shadows and working with just really, really low light stuff because you could zoom in and see where the detail was. Anyway, that transformed it for me. I was out there. We sold all the film gear.
All the gear went.
I think we spent £1,000 just on 2 micro drives. You know, the things, little mini drives. Anyway, so we've got all the gear, and from there on, we went to the S2s, which came out 2 years later. Then it moved up to 6 million pixels or something by then, and then into Nikon, and then I bought a Hasselblad medium format because I needed to start shooting again for the photo library, and they wouldn't take pictures from 6 million pixel cameras. You know, that wasn't sensible enough. So I bought a Hasselblad with a phase 1 back P25 plus and a Hasselblad H2, and I had that for 3 years. And you know what? The quality of the photography was superb. You know, the pixels and the capture one and everything was like, you know, wow. But the pictures are boring. They were. Right. There's no life. It was dead. You take a picture, you have to wait a second to take another picture. There's a big clunk, you know. And there was no moment, no spark, no life. And everybody, you bring this big camera up and you put it in front of someone, and they thought they're going stiff. What do I do? How bad do you want me to be? And you know,
the freeze.
The freeze. I picked this little Fuji up, and I was shooting away, and it's like I'm doing selfies. Everyone's relaxed. And so when I went from the Hasselblad through, I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew the Hasselblad wasn't right for me. So I sold it, and I bought Canon 5D and the trilogy of lenses, you know, the big, the wide, the medium, and the tight f2.8 zooms, and a couple of primes. I think I had the 50 at f1.2 and etc. And then I bought the 100mm, which was nice, a macro L. But still, for me, it was just a big thing, you know, not just, it wasn't a problem carrying the weight. It was just unnecessarily big, and you put this thing up to your face, and you've got no connection with the customer.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I can know where you're coming
So
from.
it is. You see, I bring this. I'm down here with a camera. Yeah, pull out the little screen. I can see what's happening here. It's like I'm working on medium format, waist level finder. Wow. Anyway, the connection is amazing, and that's what matters, because the energy in the pictures comes from that connection that I have with the client, the model, whoever it is that I'm photographing, and I put that energy into the pictures. And the Fuji has given me the opportunity to do that. The camera doesn't get between me and the person I'm photographing, even if I'm using the viewfinder. I'm here. I'm already pre-focused. I'm holding the thing, and I'm there. I can come in here, pick the picture off, and just get a little bit more energy. And it's so light. It's so easy to use.
Yeah. That Fuji X-T1 obviously wasn't the first Fuji you bought. You bought the X Pro 1 Fuji. Was that the reason why you bought the Pro 1? Because you had this, as we were talking before, this rangefinder style of camera where you were basically, I don't know, are you left or right-eye dominant?
No, I mean, it's I'm left-eyed, which means I get all this sort of
so you're going to have your you're the same as me.
Viewfinder, yeah. I bought an X100. Okay, I was in Photokina looking for lighting stands for my. Obviously I have lovegroveshop.com, and we sell specialist lighting equipment, and I was looking at being the UK importer for a new range of lighting stands, and I was also looking at other products there as well, which I wanted to add to our sort of emporium of kit. And I went past the sort of camera hall. There's a different hall for each thing. And I walked to the camera hall, and there was Fujifilm there. And I'm thinking, really, what have they got? And then in this glass case was this, looked like a Leica or something. What's that going on there? And I got sucked in. Anyway, so while I was there, I pre-ordered it. And I think I had to wait 3 months or so, and it arrived just in time. For me, I took it to Berlin. I did some workshops in Berlin, and it was the first time I'd used the camera properly, and I just loved it. I didn't even bother picking the Canon up. I was doing my workshops, walking around with this, shooting with the X100, and I just felt amazing. It just felt great. I could hold the camera up, I could see the screen on the back, real live view, a certain amount of detachment. You know what it's like when you're photographing, I don't know, anything from a plate of food or a drink or something with a camera phone. You can get the phone down there, and you can get the composition right and the light, and you can take a picture. Now, if you had to try and do that with an SLR, you'd be on your knees, you'd be moving stuff out the way, pushing chairs out the way, and you'd always have the wrong lens on the camera. Oh, I can't get close enough. And, all this stuff. Suddenly, photography has become easy. That's all history. Now we've got these cameras with the lenses on the back, the screens on the back. We can compose with that. And you're looking at a two-dimensional image in a real space, and you can separate it. You can move it down, up. Where do I need it to be? Where's the exact spot? That's where I want it, and you can take your shot. It's people, professionals are the first to sort of have a go at photographers who chimp on the back of the camera, or who use the LCD for composing an image. But for me, the camera is the process. It doesn't have to be professional. It has to be a bit about getting the right image, about having the right moment, having fun with your photography, enjoying it. Anyway, so I bought the X Pro 1. I had all my Canon gear, and I had got my Nikon gear and stuff like that, and I didn't really need anything else. And Julie, my wife, and the finance director of my business, said, "Well, I can authorize you this. You're not going to go out and buy another camera system just because you want to, because the business doesn't need it." And I'm thinking, fair enough. And we've already got where we are in business because she's managed to stop me spending all the profit.
I've got one of those indoors as well.
Well, I'm very grateful for that. And so I just went and looked in my bank account. I thought, I can just scrimp and save. And I sold a couple of bits and pieces on eBay, as you do. And I bought the X Pro 1 with the 18mm, the 35, which I've still got here, and the 60mm lens. And they arrived, and they were rattly, and anyway, I put it all in a bag and went off to America. And I did Route 66. And we just spent 3 weeks driving around America in big muscle cars, those sort of things. And with this X Pro 1, and when I got back, I realized that was it. I looked at the SLRs. I didn't want to pick them up.
No.
And I never looked back, to be quite honest. You know, it's not so much whether the viewfinder's offset to the side or whether it's an optical. I've never used the optical viewfinder. You know, okay, hands up. Maybe I'm. You know, I use the electronic viewfinder because I can like to see what I've got. And there was a little bit of delay on the X Pro one, but hey, not a problem. You know, you can still, if you know what you're doing, and you know when, you know, if you know when to press the button, it doesn't matter whether you're looking through the hole or not. You know, so it's one of those things that you can get the feel in the moment and just go with the rhythm of the moment rather than be looking at the image and thinking, oh, it's there, or is it going to happen? Because you can get so sucked into the image, you're completely detached from what's in front of you.
And the very important point you make there as well, because when the camera becomes part of you, it gets out of the way of what you want to do. It's not, for instance, I'll give you an example for me. Yeah. When I used to do my business trips, I used to take my low pro bag out. I'd have the D50 and the D200, 3 lenses. I'd have my little 1 series camera as well from the Nikon range with 3 lenses there. I'd also have a film camera as well. And basically, when I was going around, I'd have the 35mm. I thought, oh, shall I put the 50 on or shall I put the 7200 on? All this, it became, as I've nicknamed it, the just-in-case bag of gear. And it wasn't until I blamed 3 people just recently, 3 people I've got to know, I blamed 3 people for me being involved with Fuji. Dave Hobby and Zach Arias, because they spoke so eloquently and lively about the X100 and the X100S, and you, because you spoke about the XT10. Which I've got here. So it's an important point because I've got my X100S, my XT10, and 2 lenses, the 35mm and what I consider the fantastic 1855 lens. And basically, we said this before the show. When I got the XE1, which was my first Fuji camera, photography came back to me. The camera got out of the way and I could enjoy taking my photographs. Yeah. And that is what Fuji have done.
Yeah, well, the XE1, you see, is what I really sort of needed. I mean, I bought the X Pro one, and I absolutely love the looks. The X Pro one's a great camera. It feels good. It's solid. It's heavier than the XE1, and it's slightly larger, but it is built beautifully. But I don't use that little optical viewfinder. And so the XE1, if that had been around at the time, would have been fine for me. Yeah. But of course, then they brought out, so they had the X Pro one, which I totally love. And I'd love the opportunity to get an X Pro 2 if one should ever arrive, just simply because it's a simple camera. There's not knobs and buttons and dials and stuff. It's not a technical tool. It's a tool of passion, really. You know, once you work it manually and just go off and shoot and enjoy it. This camera here allows me to do all my commercial work, my photo library work. You know, it's got every gizmo and button and, function. It's about 6 function buttons on here. And it's great. And when I'm teaching and when I'm working, I don't feel in any way less equipped than an SLR shooter, if that makes sense. And I've got everything I need. So it covers all the bases. But the X Pro one is a camera that it's a little bit more than that. It's a little bit more. It's a bit like having an old Golf GTI Mark 1. You know what I mean? A 1600 or 8, whatever. Because in that era, there's nothing in it. You know, it hasn't got airbags or heated seats, or it probably not even got electric windows. You know, it's got nothing in it. And yet it's a car with soul. And that's what I felt the X Pro 1 had. It was the first camera I had for a while, which was with soul. But of course, it's the lenses. That's what I bought into. I mean, the camera itself, you couldn't tell from any of my work over the last 10 years, whether I shot it on a Canon, a Nikon, a Fuji, a Pentax, whatever. You would not tell. You couldn't tell. But you could tell what lens it was shot on. And that's the difference. And that's why when I got those first 3 lenses of the Fuji, I realized, wow, these are brilliant. And in fact, they were resolving far more detail than my Canon was. Even if the Canon had a bigger sensor and more pixels or whatever, that was irrelevant. It was the detail that was being resolved in the image and how 3-dimensional the image is. You know, how it's got that sort of, you're converting, because this lens, you see, it has to convert the 3-dimensional scene that we see into a 2-dimensional image. It's the most important part of that process. Of what? Apart from you, the photographer, for standing in front of something interesting. You know, that's the first thing you're going to do.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
The point is, Yeah, the point is that lens is the key, and of course it's the lenses. I felt, okay, these lenses are great. I can do something with these. And as they kept starting bringing out new ones and other ones, and there's a zoom here, and oh, I've got to try that, and I've got to try that. And of course, it's like you get sucked in a way. I've got lots of different lenses, but what I can do is I can pick a kit for a job. So I'll take, when I go to Spain next week, I'm taking the XT. I'll probably take the XT10. Depending on once I've weighed all my bags, if I've got a bit more weight, if I've got a bit more allowance left, I'll put the XT1 in. I mean, ultimately, they both do the same job. You know, one's a little bit smaller than the other. They're both, as far as I can tell, they are the same. And okay, this is perhaps nicer to hold, and I've got a grip on it, etc. The XT1, but the XT10's fine. It's a good camera. Now, so I'll take one of those. I'll take the 16mm lens because that's my sort of preferred wide now. I'll take the 23 because that's my sort of wide. It's a wide, but a sort of standard wide. The 23 with this X100T, by the way, it's got the equivalent to a 23. It's got a 23mm lens, which is equivalent of 35. If I only had one camera in the world, this would be it, and I'm happy. I could shoot all day with one of these, you know. And I did in Copenhagen actually last week. Went out for the day, and all I had was this with me, photographing a model using lights and stuff. So yeah, 16, 23, 35, which is a brilliant little lens. It's small, compact. Mine's a little bit tired now, but it's done a lot of shoots. Of course, it's just as sharp as it always has been. Then the 56, and the new kid on the block is the 90. Now, I didn't expect to like the 90. This is bad news, I'm afraid, because when you try it out, you're going to want one. It's this whole gear acquisition thing, isn't it? You know, it rattles. I'm thinking, what's all that about? And because it doesn't have IS, image stabilization, and so I'm thinking I need to be up on some 500th of a second or something, shutter speed for it. But actually, I don't. I found that a 250th is right. I can work at a 250th handheld, wide open. But the quality of the pictures is just beautiful. I wasn't, you know, it wasn't jumping out at me. I just thought, well, I've got to give this a go. I've got to try it. I love it. So the 90 is actually really well done. I think I probably gave Fuji a bit of stick initially, thinking, well, why haven't you put IS in it? You know, what's the point? But actually, guys, you did it well. It works really well. Yeah.
Good segue again, Damien. We're going to do a screen share, and we had a great little chat just before the show.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him.
Don't tell him. Got to keep it quiet. But basically, what we wanted to do, we wanted to concentrate on your website, which was to talk about the images that you've taken with the Fuji XF23 1.4 lens. So I've got them on the thumbnails like you asked me to do. Tell me where to go. Let's click and we go.
Let's start top left, shall we? It's a good place.
The ballerina.
Yeah, ballerina. Okay,
brilliant shot.
Thank you. This is taken in Cambodia on a workshop last year, and it's at Bokor Mountain. There's a palace on the top of Bokor Mountain, an old casino, which was the last stand of the Khmer Rouge. Right up, you know, they were. Right. We all thought that they'd gone in the 70s, but actually they were still kicking around up there, and then right up till the early 90s. But anyway, all the walls were full of bullet holes and shell holes, and they filled them all in. That's why the plaster's like that. But it's a wonderful building, and it's a sort of a monument, but not a monument. You know, I don't think anyone knows quite what to do with it. But the photograph we're looking at is Yulia, my model from Cambodia, fantastic lady actually, and she's wearing my tutu and my top and the gloves I bought from Claire's Accessories, because it's part of a project. I mean, I've got a longer term project called Tutu, and it may well become another book. And but the thing is, I shot this on the Fuji X Pro 1. I'm really low down. It's just above the water line, and it's got the 23mm lens. And it's probably wide open at f1.4, and I'm working on a 500th of a second. Now, I chose a 500th because of the water. You can see it's frozen water, the action there. This is what I needed. I needed a good, strong look and a feel. Now, the lighting, I've set her in that position because we've got a 3/4 backlight from the left, from the window just out of shot. There's a 3-quarter backlight from the right, from the window you can see on the right. And you can see the effect of that lighting, not just on her face, but also on her legs. You see the rim light down each side. Now, there was too much light coming from the camera position because there's a window behind me and above me. But I got 2 people to stand in front of the window to block the light, so that it gave me that much more stronger dynamic of the light from behind. And there's the picture.
Lovely.
I wouldn't
Beautiful
have wanted
shot.
to be lying in that water with an SLR.
No, exactly right. No, but, interesting point though. X Pro 1 this was used, and that's not with a swivel back, is it? That's
no, but I can still crouch down and look at the back of the LCD. Ultimately, the framing that you need in this situation.
Yeah, lovely.
Let's move on. Let's have a look at some others.
Let's go. Which one should we go to now?
Let's go to the boxes there. Look,
let's go to the boxes, because we've been told many times, haven't we, viewers? You can't use a mirrorless camera to do sport photography. And
well, you can, and it's actually really good. It's shot with a 23. Now the 23, of course, is a f1.4 lens. This was probably shot at 2.8, I'm guessing now, but I know that it was on a 500th of a second. For any movement like this, I work at a 500th. It's not enough to freeze the water, but you can see it. It's there. And what I've done is I've set my exposure for the guys in the ring. You can see that there's some sort of tungsten lights there lighting up the ring. And I think I was probably on, it's probably 3200 ISO or even 6400 ISO on a Fuji X Pro 1. Okay. Now I've got a 23mm lens, and I'm looking at the boxes. I'm lining myself up. The camera's down at the canvas level, pointing up towards the center. It's pre-focused directly for the guys in this position. So when they came together and they knocked their gloves together at the beginning, I focused on them, switch it to manual focus. Then all I've got to do is, with half an eye on the LCD, is sort of pan with the action, but looking at the action, and I press the button at the time that these guys hit each other.
Lovely.
And so I'm using, I'm not looking at the slight delay in the LCD. I'm actually just panning the camera below me, but looking at the action and going now and now and now. And because it's on manual focus, it's not having no focus hunting or any of that. It just takes a picture when you press the button. And that's a great way to do sport. It's shooting JPEG, of course, and you can actually put it on continuous mode and just keep shooting.
And that's how the sports photographers used to do it in those days, wasn't it? Zone focusing, and basically set the point where the guys are going to come into the shot, and they take three or four shots.
Yeah, I mean, I probably took, to be fair, I probably took 300 or 400, but I have got perhaps a panel of 20 shots that would tell the story that are usable from the night. Of which one of them is here. I only wanted to choose one, because once you've got one boxing shot, the others look pretty much the same.
I just love it. This particular photograph,
because of the guy,
the power, the muscles in here, but this splash of spray here.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, these are Thai kickboxers in Cambodia. Look at the picture to the left of that one of the girl in the red dress. You see this? You remember I was talking about Bristol Museum. This was for Bristol Museum, and it's in Bristol Museum. They wanted to show the grandeur of the Great Staircase. They were thinking that there'd be on Valentine's Day. They were going to do a Valentine. Well, they did have a Valentine's evening, and that's why the red roses are there. And Molly Nishi-Maid, a dress designer, got her on board because she produces his most stunning gowns. And we went and shot it. And I lit this with three lights. There's one on the background there with a scatter gel on it, which breaks the light up, gives it that dappled look. And the key light again has got a scatter gel on. Now, if you look at the pedestal that the lion is on, you see the halfway down the pedestal is a darker patch. That's because the gel on the light is letting light through in a pattern. So some areas are dark, some areas are light. And that's the technique that I used on there, and it's also the technique that I've used in the set behind me. I've got a light with a scatter gel on, and it's giving a dappled feel. So, but let's have a look at some others. I mean, these are all shot, by the way, with a 23mm lens.
All with a 23mm, which is a great way to show.
Let's go. Let's have a look at the monk. That one there.
Let's look at him. One by the steps. Yeah.
Yeah, so this guy, we were in Cambodia, and it was partly, we did do some model photography, did some art nude photography, but we also photographed the scenery, the people of Cambodia, the children, the energy, and some design work like this. So this is more of a what I call a commission style work. So if you're shooting for National Geographic or something like that, they'd want work that shows another level, shall we say. And there's you always get fixers and people setting things up. So the fixer that I had with me on this shoot, or what we had with us, because it was a workshop, I asked them to go and see if this chap, because he was standing on the other side of the street behind me, if we could photograph him, and he said yes, okay, we could do it. And we had about 2 minutes or so because he was going to go off to prayers. So I found this ladder lying on the ground next to another building, which has got a bit of bamboo scaffolding up. Pulled the ladder out, put it against the wall, and rigged up a Cactus RF60 flash down barefaced, just zoomed it into 105 and just pointed it down to where he was going to stand. And I gave him that space. Now, I chose that wall, of course, because it's got yellow and blue. I thought the colors would go really well with that orange. And then gave it a blaster flash, and it looks fantastic. And of course, it's shot on the shot of probably f11, 180th of a second, ISO 200.
Fantastic.
So there we go.
Let's go to the next one. I like this. Yeah,
well, this was once he'd gone off to prayers. There's another group which were there's quite a few different groups of Buddhists in and around these temples, and another group were going through to eat, and my fixer asked whether we could go just get a few pictures of them, and so we were invited in, and it was an absolute privilege to be here.
Yes, I bet it was.
And so I'm sitting on the floor, and I've just got the camera at my waist level, and I've framed it all up. I'm holding the camera still, and I'm just watching their movement. They're chatting away. I'm just trying to get between the words and just get a moment where there's a little bit of tension, not tension, but just thought, and you want to get drawn into what these people are thinking and doing, rather than just a picture of people eating. There has to be something more to it. Of course, we're shooting it into the light, and it's just a fantastic moment. So very privileged to be here.
Yeah, I was going to say it's you don't get those opportunities rather that often to do something like. Let's look at a couple more actually, Damien, before we go back.
Yeah, let's have a quick look. Go back up again for a moment, because there's a shot on. They keep going one more. There's the last of on the color row there, the one on the left.
This one.
Let's click on that one. Yeah, absolutely. Because this is in The Hague, in Holland, and it's a very simple picture, and it's inspired by the color palette of Edward Hopper, American painter, painted scenes in America in the 30s and stuff. And very, very interesting colors. It likes to use opposites, so there's quite a lot of yellows and blues, which work of course as opposites. And I decided to warm up a gel on my speed light for delighting Rosalind in the foreground, but not by too much, and because it's sunlight in the background there you see on the ground. And then you've got reflected blue sky on that building in the far back, and so when I was working, this was on a one-to-one training day with a photographer based in Holland, and so when I'm out doing my workshops, they happen all over in Spain, in Italy, etc., in France. I like to tack on a one-to-one training day after the workshop, so that it just provides a bit more variety. And of course, here we've got those vertical lines in the staircase at the back, the horizontal lines in that grid in the foreground, and then there's a strong diagonal. That staircase is pointing down towards Rosalind, and of course I used that as the motivation for my light. So my light is coming down that way as well, and I've zoomed the light in, and it just gives a very striking, quite ethereal look. And of course you can see the way she's placed. I've kept the back of the camera upright, and it keeps all the verticals in the frame upright, and I've placed her accurately in that doorway behind her, so that she fills that frame there. So there's a lot of composition and design in what I do and how I set it up, and I suppose that's part of the signature of the look.
I think a good point you make, actually. Obviously I can see the stairway there, but it's that continuation there of that spotlight that you mentioned, which draws you straight to the image. Obviously you see the girl straight away, but it's everything that leads to her all the time. There's no distraction of you going off at any point of this photograph. There's no light on the edge, so to speak. It's a great shot. That I love that shot. I love the
Thank you.
colours. I'm going to come out of screen share.
Which one?
Which one?
Oh, I was going to say, should we look at some tight shots? I mean, all these pictures were shot on the 23mm lens, and of course there are others here. I can tell that we're probably running a little bit tight for time. So let's stick with this palette here. Go to the one on the left there. One on the left of that one there.
This one?
It's a little sort of art nude, as some people would call it. I don't think the word art really comes into it, just because someone's got no clothes on. I have no idea why it's called art, but anyway, it's just a nude shot I did of this lady Yulia, absolutely fabulous lady. And I remember when I spoke to her on the over Skype or Viber or whatever it was beforehand, before I came out to Cambodia, and because she said, "Oh, by the way, I volunteered myself to be your nude model in Kep, which is near Phnom Penh." And I said, okay, that's fine. But I said, you understand that I don't use Photoshop. So, I see it, I let it go, see it as it is. I don't nip and tuck and things. And she said, that's fine. You understand that I'm 40. And I said, yep, fine. That's great. I don't mind. And away we went. And we had some most amazing experience. Really worked really well together. And we're still good friends now. And you can see that I've used those broken tiles there on the floor as a sort of looks like a map in a way of a country or something, all divided up like that. But I just sort of placed her in there, and you can see there's a bit of haze. It looks like there's some halation from those windows in the background. That's because I'm using a Tiffin filter on the lenses. I'm using a Tiffin Black Pro Mist filter, and it takes the highlights and it spreads them. It scatters the highlights into the shadows, and it gives it that a little bit of a glow, that ethereal look.
Yeah.
And I placed her, of course.
Interesting aspect, because obviously you are drawn to those window openings, and you think, oh, they're blown out there. But of course, again, with that being there, you're drawn, exactly right. It's part of the, you're drawn into the model's body.
It's nearly that Close Encounters or whatever it is, the spaceship and the light and the stuff. Yeah, exactly. And it's, but the thing is, of course, it's the subtleties and the tones and the light on her, of course, which are the most beautiful part of the scene. And that's just the way it is. Again, we're shooting into the light, so the darker part of her body is towards the camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely shots. We'll come out of that now, Damien. Thank you very much for talking those images through with us, and obviously talking about the lighting setup and obviously at the same time showing the fantastic quality of that particular lens, the 23mm. And as we know, Fuji do make some very good lenses. Let's, at this point, because I don't want to forget, because I know I will, let's talk about your latest book. You've got that to hand, and you can show the cover. That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. This is Chloe Jasmine Wichello. It's a book of, some photographers use it as a sort of style guide. It's one model, okay, which I photographed in sort of year 2010. And we shot this book over a period of, I think it was 14 shoots, 4.5 months. And it's just full of wonderful images that we worked through together, as black and whites and color. There's a bit of poetry in there, but it's if you ever want to know how to pose someone's hands or how to create shape and design and line in pictures, the viewpoint to shoot from, directions of lighting, this book has got all of that in there. Okay, I don't explain the F numbers and things like that. It goes sort of a bit beyond that. You need to sort of, it's like a sort of bit of inspiration, shall we say. And as you go through life, there are certain things people you meet and places you go to that become inspiring. And working with Chloe Jasmine was that little journey. Now she's in Celebrity Big Brother, I think, at the moment. So we've got I think there are 800 or 1,000 books left, and once they're gone, So once but she's only going to go from fame to fame. I don't know whether you can see this here. I'm going to bring it up close to that camera. Okay, so there's a picture here. Now, the interesting part of this shot is that I'm not focused on the near eye. I'm focused on the mouth. Okay, it just so happens that the far eye is in focus as well. But it's because I realized quite early on that the rules that people say, you focus on the nearest eye and things like that, actually, why? You question it. And because I found that when you're looking at someone and you're communicating with them, you're looking at their mouth, their lips, the way that they're talking. And so I decided I started focusing on mouths and lips and letting eyes go. And especially when there's no eye contact. And wow, it just started looking better. So I'm almost saying, just question everything. I just thought
exactly.
Interesting little.
I want to ask you two questions. Basically, again, before I forget, where can we buy that book now? There's two places.
You can buy it from Amazon, of course. As with you can buy the complete guide to professional wedding photography, if you like. But this one here, Chloe Jasmine Wichello. I mean, she's on Celebrity Big Brother. She's been on X Factor. She's going to be on everything. It's one of those sort of rising star moments. But you can buy it from lovegroveshop.com. And so you can buy it. If you buy it from us, actually, on lovegroveshop.com, I'll sign the copies. So all the copies that go out from our own website are signed, packaged. And I believe the last time I looked on eBay, signed copies were going for about £80. So, and we sold them for 20. So.
Fantastic.
Maybe I should buy them back.
Yeah, maybe you should collect them back. The other question I wanted to ask you was, how much input do you have on your model's performance?
Okay, a lot. Now, the performance of a model is a strange thing. It sounds like it's driving a car, but no. I direct the action. Okay. Now, majority of the models that I work with, I say the majority because there are a few every now and then who've got poses. These are people that just happen to be comfortable in front of camera. They aren't professional models in terms of that's what they do day in, day out. There's a lot of models that I photograph who are, they work at the pub down the road or what have you. And I've met them, and they may have day jobs. They might be at university or study or something, but they're just comfortable to be in front of camera. But I direct them. Some models have got these poses and things like that, but I tend to avoid working with models.
You want to get them away from that, don't you?
But when I was at the BBC,
isn't it?
It is. It can be, but I mean, it suits certain things. But when I was at the BBC, I was working with directors all the time, and we're shooting Casualty, EastEnders, whatever it was. There was a director, even sport, but. And the directors, when we were working on film, I worked on 16mm film at the BBC on some of the films we made were things like, it was called Magnox, I can't remember what it became after, and one called Mutineer and things like that. And these were films that there were two directors. There was like a sort of a director of photography who was in charge of the look and the feel, and was walking around like this and thinking, I think we should be on a 16mm lens here, and let's bring that in, let's have the action in here, and let's have the extras come on there, and on my third cue, etc. And then you'd have the sort of the main director who'd be working to the side with the artists, just rehearsing. I want that, just give me that turn again, just give it that, no, I'll just drop your eyes, I want you to look straight into the camera. Bring that energy and just working with their performance, and just deliver that line slower, darling. It just feels a little hurried. Okay, and go for another take, please. Okay, rolling, and all this sort of stuff. But of course, you see, you when you're with this thing or whatever today, you soon pick up what is it? Why are we doing another take? That sounded great. Didn't forget the words. And of course, then the performance starts to flow. Yeah. And then sometimes a director will create a lot of tension in the space, and we're building up. I'm thinking, my God, this is really heavy. What's going on? And he's shouting a bit at the lighting, going, come on, get out of there. Just and there's all this tension. But what you don't realize is that actually we're building up to a scene where there's a fight. There's just, the absolute screaming fight between a husband and a wife, and then the door slams and out she goes. And then that tension is released. But the director's role is to make that energy. And of course, when I'm working with a model, or I'm working on a set, or we're trying to create fun, I will have fun with them. Whether it's have a pillow fight just to loosen everyone up, make everyone laugh, and just create a bit of energy. And then suddenly the whole room that we're in is changed, and the dynamic in the pictures will change with it.
I see. Very, very interesting there of your concept there, and how you create the imagery. Lovely. Come to that point of the show, Damien, where the two questions which I asked you for a little bit of homework.
Right.
You forgot 100 lines. Oh no,
it's okay. It's all right.
Your inspiration. Who have you found that has inspired you the most?
Well, it's a difficult thing, really, because I don't tend to look at other people's work and then follow it. So I'm a bit lazy like that. I also feel that when I went out and started shooting weddings, I didn't look at other wedding albums, and I didn't look at the Guild's manual of how to shoot a wedding, you know. And I've never been shooting with another professional photographer. I've never gone to a wedding and carried their bags or what have you. So I've always done things my own way, really. But so my first bit of inspiration came when I was at the BBC from the camera supervisors I was working with at the time, who taught me everything about framing, about looking room, about balance in a picture, about timing and rhythm, about movement. To the lighting directors who taught me about contrast, about tone, about revealing shape, revealing shadow, revealing texture. So those people were the sort of the hub of everything. But then since then, there's this guy called, you see, I've got this ADHD thing, so I can't remember names, and then names are a problem for me. It will come to me. But it'll be there any moment. But there's a few photographers, but Vincent Peters, he's the guy I'm thinking of. Vincent Peters, but he's an amazing photographer. I mean, he's very fortunate, actually. I'm quite envious because he gets to photograph very, very beautiful people, actors, actresses, models, etc. But he uses that classic light. He's like me in a way. I look at his work, I'm thinking, a breath of fresh air. Someone with a budget, okay, so they've got quite a few lights, lots of little things going on, and producing absolute masterpieces where you've got a really beautifully lit foreground, wonderfully lit midfield and background, and you've got a lovely energy, and there's a sexual tension in the picture. It's just fantasy, but in a realistic way. We're not having to rely on overt styling or post-production. We're looking at straight color imagery, black and white imagery, but very, very beautiful. So Vincent Peters, I reckon, is pretty cool. And people talk about all the great photographers of the past who've done the Hollywood stars like George Howard, etc. But actually, there's a studio in Paris called Studio Harcourt. Now, they've been going, I think, since the 30s or something. They're still using these hard lights, you know, the Fresnel lights, like I'm lit with today. You know, I've actually got a bit of frost gel on my key light, just to give me a little bit, you know, because I'm getting old, you know. But anyway, these guys, they've Studio Harcourt in Paris. Look them up. You know, they shoot black and whites, and you'll see Arnold Schwarzenegger's been there, and these famous tennis players, and all sorts of actors, actresses, and you'll see that their customer base is fantastic, and people will fly over from New York, be photographed by them, buy their prints, etc., and then disappear off. And in a way, I'd be quite happy to have their business. You know, I think that style of work is fantastic. However, I think Vincent Peters takes it because he photographs in wonderful locations. I don't want to be stuck in
it sounds to me as though Vincent Peters would in actual fact be your favorite photographer then.
I think, I mean, you know, if you had to pick someone who's in the commercial field, you know, jobbing photographer day in, day out, be it fashion, commercial, whatever genre you're looking for, I'd say he tops it. You know, I rarely find images that are better. You know, you get some photographs by you know, other famous photographers that sort of come close, and you know, there's we've got. You have to help me out here. Who did the train to Paris, midnight train to Paris, and anyway, whatever. There's all sorts of fun, wonderful photographers from the past, whether it's Helmut Newton, David Bailey, what have you. Perhaps 5 to 10% of their work I love, and the rest of it perhaps I don't really get. But that 5% is brilliant. Yeah. Whereas in Vincent Peters, I would say more than 95% is brilliant. So, you know, it ticks all the boxes for me.
Yes, I agree with you. From my aspect, there's one particular photographer that ticks all the boxes for me, and that's Sol Leiter. But again, it's for everybody's got their own opinion. Some people, in actual fact, have answered that question. They said, "I don't have a favorite photographer," which I find a bit hard to understand actually. But there we go.
You don't have to. I mean,
individuals.
If you're the designer of a car, you don't necessarily, for a Jaguar or Aston Martin or something, you don't have to have a favorite other designer.
That's very true. That's a fair comment, actually. Fair comment. Damien, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's been fascinating listening to you talking about your career and your move through from BBC through to photography and your workshops and your teaching. And thank you so much for sharing that work as well on the screen share where we saw your on-site work, as I would call it, location work. Absolutely fantastic. And to my viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this particular show. And I forgot to tell Damien this at the end of the show.
That?
If you're going out shooting this weekend, leave your camera back at home. leave your
camera back at home.
Yeah. All the best. Have a good time, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.